Yeah, we're glad that you guys could join us. This is kind of great. So before we get started, just a quick note to say that our Patreon is up and running. So very exciting news. If you want to support us on our Patreon, it's patreon.com/flute-tech-talk. And there this is kind of a little mini preview of what we'll be doing on Patreon. We'll be inviting people to be on the Zoom with us, and we'll on the Patreon versions be inviting you to ask your questions live. So if you have questions that you want to ask us, join the Patreon. We'll be having videos over there, and we can actually like interact and get some good conversations going. So patreon.com/flute-tech-talk. Our disclaimers are that our opinions are our own, and they do not, they're not the opinions of anyone that we may or may not be affiliated with, just us. We all have different views on things, which is great because sometimes we have some interesting conversations about why we do something. And I always learn new things, even when I fundamentally disagree. And then I go, oh, all right. And I'm sure these guys do too. We might change our minds on anything that we say as early as after the show ends or tomorrow or next week. And that's the nature of getting better at this game, because flute repair is hard. And we're always learning new things that make it more better.
More better.
More better.
More better.
Yeah. And as always, use this information at your own risk. Any advice that we give is purely theoretical.
Over the internet anyway.
Over the internet anyway. So, all right, awesome. So shall we dive in, my friends?
Let's go, team.
Yes.
All right, let's do this. All right, so our first question of the night comes from Anand. And Anand asks, since we do not have help around the corner for a regular COA, so Anand lives in an area where there is no flute tech in a drivable distance, and also not, he can't even mail to anyone, I think, in his country. So he's truly isolated. So this is sort of a interesting question. So he says that, in that case, do you recommend putting an iota of oil through a needle dropper at the pivots? Most oil manufacturers claim that if the oil is the right viscosity, then operating the key after oiling would actually suck the oil into the mechanism and not ooze out onto the pets. Because I think in like our first episode, we had recommended people not to oil. So I think that he is referencing that. On that note, what is the recommended viscosity for a soprano or concert flute? So our order for answering this question is going to be me, and then Kim, and then Adam, and then Rachel. So I'm going to set my timer for 30 seconds. And okay, so in the case that you are in a place where you're so truly remote that you cannot mail your flute anywhere and there's nobody drivable, and you want to be taking good care of your flute, I would say that I like the word iota, because that really is the right amount. An iota of oil. And the right viscosity. I would use something on the thinner side, and that's my 30 seconds, so I'm going to let my colleagues fill in on more specifics than that. So next up is Kim. Go.
All right. So based on this specific situation, what I would recommend is that synthetic oils tend to work better than natural oils. And one of the easiest ways to apply it would be with like just a little bit drop on a toothpick, like using a toothpick to apply it, because then you can't have any accidents. The recommendation I would recommend that might be available in your area is a synthetic, like a sewing machine oil. Now, I would not recommend that to anyone that isn't in this situation, but that's the best I can think of.
Okay. Adam.
Right. So the process that you're describing, where it sort of sucks it in, that's called capillary action, which I personally don't find a lot of success in that. I tend to find that the drop actually just goes down the post. But if you really are in that situation, you can find diagrams online that show like which things are normally steels as compared to screws, in which case you could even just use like a 5W20 synthetic motor oil, just because a lot of the makers actually use varying grades of motor oil when they do things. So that's kind of how I do it in this specific situation.
Okay. Rachel.
Yes. I also like the word iota, and literally a drop per joint that you see. I've worked with a lot of different kinds of oils and different applications, and they do get everywhere. They have a way. They won't just go where you want them to go, no matter how good the technique is. However, working it in, through capillary action, if you can do as much as you can by just working the keys, and then get like an alcohol wipe or fingernail polish on a cotton ball, and that's acetone based. And if you wipe the metal after you've put on the oil, especially the acetone actually removes oil, so that would help control that a little bit.
I just want to clarify that you meant to say nail polish remover, not nail polish.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah, don't do that. Don't do nail polish. That'll have the opposite effect.
It would be interesting.
Heaven.
Interesting.
Yeah, nail polish.
Anybody want to add anything?
I mean, you can also use like an eye of a needle to transfer a drop of oil. That'll work really well in this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, this is truly unique.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once again, this is truly like if you're in such an isolated area that there's no one in driving distance, and mailing it is also impractical, which is pretty isolated, but people are in those situations. So
yeah, and they still want to play
the other thing is that with Zoom, we can be anywhere. So the other thing is that if you wanted if you had access to like a video chat platform or something like that, you could also have a tech who might be willing to like watch you while you're doing it, sort of go, no, not there, just there. Sort of like do a little bit of hands over hand. But I'd recommend definitely not using anything straight from a bottle, even if it is like
one of these guys.
Like even if it's one of the ones that we would normally use that has a needle, I would not use that if I wasn't a tech, just because sometimes you get about 45,000 times more than what you want. So I would put some on a little plate or something, and then like literally move it over, just for safety, because you're so far from being able to access a technician. You don't want to create a problem while you're trying to prevent one.
Right on.
Right, because it is so easy to over oil in these circumstances, to the point that when I was my first repaired kind of job, there was a flute that came in and the pads were so saturated with oil you could squeeze it out. And that's really easy to do.
It's so moisturizing though. I mean, it's like
yeah,
really good for your skin,
Yeah, this is an unusual circumstance. So, I mean, just reach out and try to find people if you do have that video platform, and we can, people will try to help in any way that we can. So,
yeah, for sure. Okay, next question. So there's a post to the right of the B flat thumb key where the screw keeps coming loose. Haha, it's a screw loose. It's a screw loose. Is there any way to make sure that it stays in? I'm afraid that one day I will not notice that it is loose and I might lose it. Okay, so our order is going to be.
You'll lose a lot if that screw goes.
So Blue.
You're going to notice.
Kim, Adam, Rachel, moi. All right. Kim, take it away. What will you lose if that?
Well, you'll lose the entire thumb key. I mean, it's so it's not like you're going to be able to continue playing and it's just going to be like playing along. You're just like, my gosh, I guess it fell out last week. I mean, you're going to know right away. There's a couple things, and I'll let everybody else jump in on like techniques. But one of the things I would like to say is that if you're having problems with screws backing out, make sure you let your tech know that it's a recurring problem when you bring it in for any service, because if we don't know, then we can't rectify it.
Exactly. Adam.
Just so you all know how professional I am, it's because I do so many piccolos. I had actually grabbed my personal flute, and I'm like, what am I thinking about? And I was like, oh, it's that one, because piccolos, the keys are different. Yeah, really what it is that's not actually a screw, it's a steel. And it's a lot longer, so it is much harder to lose. And by the time it wiggles out far enough, it's going to be an issue. The flute won't play, and it also won't fit in the case anymore. So yeah, tell your tech, and there's some other stuff I'm sure they'll get to.
Okay. All right, Rachel, take it away.
Okay, I have a flute too. My volunteer. So if you notice it's loose and you can't get to someone quickly and you don't want to lose your thumb keys, all of those things are true. What you can do is try to screw it back in. However, if you're not used to turning small screws all the time, this is a very like wide open area and it's really easy to slip and gouge stuff and you'll be really sad. Well, I'll be really sad. So what you do, hold the flute like this and put your fingers on either side of the thumb post.
I'm gonna make you big.
Okay, yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, if you put your fingers on either side of the thumb post and then get your little screwdriver when you tighten it up and put it between your fingers. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that way, if you slip, your fingers will kind of protect your flute a little bit. And that's if you have to. It's best to let a technician tighten it up for you. But if you can't get to someone quickly enough, and again, you don't want your key to fall off, that's the safest way to get in here and do that with as little risk as possible. And it helps place the screwdriver for you. So. Cool. Sorry, I went long for that one.
That's okay. I gave you.
That's okay. You also included a demo.
One super simple trick that we overlooked is the fact that once it is screwed in, as a temporary quick fix until you can get it to a tech, you can put a drop of nail polish over the screw slot in the post, and that will help prevent it backing out for a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is an issue that you need to have a technician look at.
Yep. Cool. All right, onward.
Yeah. Onward.
We'll do it. All right. So, next question is Thomas asking, how often does a professional musician have a total overhaul of their flute performed? So the order for this is going to be Adam, Kim, Rachel. Why am I always last? And then me.
The deck is stacked.
The screws are stacked. Okay. Adam, take it away.
Okay, so this is a circumstance where your mileage may vary because it depends on you as a player. It depends on the specific instrument that you are playing, how it's built, how it's made, what it's made from. In these instances, I typically say you start to see those sorts of things every 8 to 10 to 12 years. It just depends on how much mileage you're putting in and depending on like the pads and their condition and what the mechanism's like. I'm done.
Good timing. Kim.
The one thing I like to point out is there's a difference between like a complete overhaul and like a repad. So you may have to have a lot of pads replaced sooner rather than having an overhaul, which is like a lot of major key fitting. So you may need all of the pads replaced anywhere from like 3 to 8 years, but you may not need the key fitting work done until late to 10 years. So it is really your mileage may vary.
Rachel.
Yes, and it depends on what type of work you do. I mean, in general, the more hours you put in, this more quickly you'll get to that overhaul, but also just there are a few other factors that can accelerate your intervals that really aren't related to the amount of time that you put in. But in general, for professionals and college students especially, you guys are putting in a lot of hours. I would expect to see those for an overhaul sooner. I've even overhauled one after 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was actually just going to add that if you are finding that you're not, I think Adam started out saying 8 to 10. If you're one of those people who needs an overhaul after 4, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just,
it happens.
It happens.
You play a
Yes. And some people are they're more particular about how the flute performs, and so those people may want an overhaul more often just because they really truly like I heard of someone who even gets their flute overhauled every single year because they like how it plays after an overhaul, and they have the money, it's important to them, they spend it every single year. That's the extreme example, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, right. So I guess in our, can I free for all in our little
Yeah.
free for all for a second? Okay. So I think this is where it's important. Kim kind of touched on this a little bit. The differences between, because some people use the word overhaul for like every service that they get done to their flute, and that's not really the word to use. So an overhaul is in my definition, um an overhaul is, like Kim said, it needs mechanical work. So like the keys are like sliding back and forth on the flute. There might be pivot play, there might be tone hole damage, there might be a bent body, there might be like extreme tendon fitting that needs to be done. It's like a lot of mechanical work that needs to get done. All the corks and felts need to be replaced. For me, a repad is pretty much just a clean oil adjust, which we talked a little bit about last time, but we'll talk about that again later. It's a clean oil adjust with new pads, which is nowhere near the, like, I don't do the mechanical work that I do in an overhaul. If somebody else wants to chime in on that or whatever.
The
or
other
anything.
thing that makes a difference is the other thing that will sometimes make a difference in how fast you need to have like overhaul key fitting work is the material the keys are made out of. If you've got like a plated key, the base material tends to be a lot harder than if you have some other, so there's a lot of other factors that can come into play there. I have clients that probably should get overhauls, like full mechanical overhauls every 4 years, and I have other ones that have been playing on their same overhaul for 15, and mechanically it's fine, it just really needs new pads. So
Yeah, because like with the key material, you know, if it's plated keys, they are very hard. Silver is actually really soft, like because I make silver keys, and
yeah,
it's just really stringy, it's really rubbery, and it does wear pretty quickly. But then like if you have a gold mechanism, gold keys are super hard, you know, so they like don't move at all, you know, in terms of wear and tear. But then sometimes if you play a lot, they do.
Yeah.
So
And sometimes it has to do with how the flute was built in the first place, because certain mechanisms are built a little bit loose to begin with, and then other, you know, if you're some flutes just are built so they wear out a little bit faster, or the type of pivot design or whatever. It just is very individual. That was it for that time slot. Do you guys want to move on, or does we? Yeah, we're good. Okay. All right. So
we can come back to it another day.
I know, we have as many episodes as we want, right? That's like, we were talking about this off air earlier, going like, but I feel like I need to give like, oh well, we don't have to answer everything in one episode.
Right.
Amazing. Okay, so our next question is, my piccolo / alto / bass does not get used very often. Why not? You should be practicing. No, I'm kidding.
Wow.
Sorry, Judgy McJudgerson here. Okay. I just lend my piccolo to people, so that's my solution.
Oh, that's how you practice it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's go.
Anyway, my piccolo / alto / bass does not get used very often. What are the maintenance and care recommendations for flutes that are not primary instruments? So our order is going to be, oh, two fell out at once. Rachel, me, I'm not last, guys. Adam, and Kim. All right, so Rachel, go for it.
So for what I call, like, if it's like a back burner instrument for you, like you don't do a lot of piccolo or not a lot of alto flute, like my alto flute, I think I played it twice this year. A flute choir's been canceled, in my defense. But anyways, I'm probably not going to COA it this year. I think in general, I tell people, like, as a starting point, let's think about every 2 years, but we can customize that based on how seldom, you know, all the factors involved in your situation.
Cool. Okay. I'm next. So yeah, I do about the same thing. So I tell people, like, if depending on how much you're playing it, if it's mostly sitting. So last time we talked about COAs and the oil getting gunky, and like it's really important to, you know, get that COA like 12 to 18 months. If you're not playing a flute, the keys aren't moving as much, so it's not as much of a wear concern, and chances are it's not out in the atmosphere as much, so the oil isn't getting as like like you can stretch it a little bit longer on a flute that spends a lot of its time in the case. So yeah, I generally say 2 years and adjust longer or shorter from there. Not usually too much longer, but you know, onward. Kim. No, Adam.
I thought Adam's next.
Yeah, you guys just.
It's okay.
So I'll be very honest and say I get almost 0 low flutes ever. I get almost all piccolos, and with that, I'm assuming that we are discussing a wood instrument, and that's kind of where I personally recommend like every year and a half, even if it's a back burner, just because if it's wood, it does need some like regular maintenance because that wood is still an organic substance that is going to break down over time. And you have to take, it's like your skin. It needs moisturization every now and then. So yeah, with those, I say every year and a half. But you can do like skinny services and cut it down a little bit. So
cool. All right, Kim.
Yeah. If it's your own instrument, it's not a shared instrument, which is a good clarifier. So if you're only playing it every once in a while, I would say, I usually recommend people do it like a general service on it, which is sort of like a yearly checkup, which might be an hour's worth of work, and then do a COA every couple years. But usually it's good to check in on them. The one thing I would say is that if they're sitting, take them out of the cases every couple months and just look at them and assess them for things like moisture, mold, give them a good sniff. I've had instruments that I thought were, I had my own personal instrument that I thought was totally fine, a previous one. And it ended up getting put in a closet that I didn't realize was damp. So I ended up having to repad the whole thing. It was a disaster. So I know I'm over, but yeah, but definitely like check in on them, even if you're not playing them, just like physically inspect them every, like once a month or every couple months, just so that you can monitor in case you notice anything getting sour.
And I just started the free for all timer, so
yeah. So, I figured you did.
So just to piggyback on that, another concern is actually insects. So if something is sitting for a long time, you can get something called pad bugs, which are actually a type of carpet beetle, and they eat wool, and a lot of pads are made out of wool. So if your flute, your alto, your bass, or your piccolo has wool pads,
let me open up that alto flute case.
Or felt on the key.
Or felt on the, right? So, and you open up that case and you see little like worm casings in there. That's actually the larva of the carpet beetles, AKA pad bugs.
Gross.
Yeah, gross.
Very important PSA though.
Yes. If Samuel, if you could put your, mute yourself, or I can mute you. Here, I'll mute you. Ha, I have the power.
Excellent.
Okay.
A little extra fuzz and then
Yes.
It feeds back on us. We can actually hear
back.
Ourselves through your mics is the other problem. So
fun.
Which,
okay, cool. We have about 40 more seconds on this topic.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Keep going.
Nothing like a little bit of paranoia, right?
It's all good. Oh, Rachel, you froze. Rachel? No, I hear her.
She'll be back in a few seconds.
Yeah. Sometimes the internet's a little fussy here.
Okay. Are you checking for pad bugs?
I did.
Yes.
Negative.
Oh, phew.
It came up negative for pad bugs.
Yes. If you do find pad bugs, pop that sucker into a giant Ziploc bag right away and like take it to your tech, because you don't want that.
Please let them know that they have them though. Don't just hand them to your tech.
No, leave it in the Ziploc bag.
It's just really terrifying when we get them, and we occasionally do, and we have to quarantine them very carefully.
Yes.
Because they get everywhere.
They do, and that's bad.
And they will multiply.
They do.
And so
we work in our houses a lot.
It has to go into the pad bug ward of the
it's like
yes,
bad.
Yes, indeed. All right,
anyway.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Fran asks, do all piccolo head joint upgrades fit about the same, or are they more brand specific? What if your brand is now obsolete? Is there any way to upgrade the head joint? So our order for this one is going to be Kim, me, Adam, Rachel. All right, Kim.
I'm going to branch this out quickly. For flute and piccolo head joints, they don't all fit equally. It not only just fit like physically fitting, but they aren't all equally as well balanced to go together. So the answer is no, you can't just randomly put two together. Some of the scales are different, and that causes some issues. So if you want to experiment, definitely experiment on the head joints you want to buy and the bodies you're going to play it on, and check it with a tuner and everything like that. So that's really.
Yeah, and just I agree with everything that you said. I would not suggest buying one blind because tenon sizes are different. Besides the obvious with piccolos, there's different tenon styles, but even like if it looks like it might fit, if you're like, ooh, this person's selling a head joint, that looks really great, I'm gonna get that. Oh, it doesn't, right? And that's true of both flutes and piccolos. Rachel, no wait, Adam.
With this one, I'm just going to touch on very lightly because there's another subject I kind of want to get to in the free-for-all. But no, not all piccolo head joints are made equally, and that's in part on purpose from the maker, because there's ultimately, you know, we want you to have a sound that you enjoy, but also we design them as a cohesive unit to present like our brand of sound to the end player. So no, they don't all fit and they're not all made equally. Yeah.
Rachel.
Yeah, and especially on piccolos, there's a lot more variability with the tenon sizes. So there's less that you can do to adapt a different head joint to your piccolo body. And the only other thing I would add is to just reiterate for emphasis the point that Kim made about checking any prospective head joint of a different brand with a tuner. But whether it's flute or piccolo, either way, check with the tuner no matter how much you love the sound. Just make sure you're okay with the combination.
Yep. Okay. Free for all.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of run with this.
I like how Adam's like, I saw mine.
I'm trying to be really.
Take it away.
I'm trying to be tactful just because I am a maker and I don't want to like seem too far one way or another. But we also have this discussion about it, your brand being obsolete. And one thing that we have to take into account is we have to start thinking about, why does the head joint no longer work for you? And is it a matter, is maybe there's something mechanically happening? Is there a repair issue that needs to be assessed? But also in the hands of a professional player, piccolos do have sort of a loose professional lifespan. They'll last a very long time in the hands of someone who plays intermittently or several times a week, but someone who puts 40 hours a weekend on a piccolo that's wood, they're going to have about the same lifespan as an oboe or a clarinet in terms of professional usage, which is probably going to put you between 8 and 12 years. It will still play really well after that time period, but the wood will have changed. And even if you had it just sitting in a box somewhere, not playing it at all, the wood is going to change over time, regardless of what we do to it, because it is actually a tree. So we have to step back and assess, why does it not work for us anymore, and what our goals and objectives are, and what's the reality of our equipment.
Cool. We still have about a minute left if anybody else wants to.
Okay. I tried to be really like compact.
That was great.
And
this is how students end up getting piccolos, though. Is that it's actually it's the same thing with oboes and piccolos, is that they often get handed down from professional players to really good like advanced players, but not professional players, and so that it's not like they're not good anymore. It's just that there is that kind of cycle that happens.
Right, like one of the best piccolos I've ever played was actually a mid-80s Haynes that I did a lot of work on, but it was becoming very resistant on certain notes in the upper register. And so when people are always like, check to make sure it has a high B or check the high G sharp, it's because those are the first two notes that tend to start to show problems as the wood changes over time. And it's because the bore itself does tend to swell, the tone hole undercutting swell, the bore will it will also just go out of round. It won't swell or shrink, it'll just change shape. So it's important to understand, what are my goals? How old is my equipment? What condition is it in? And is a head joint really the answer?
Yeah, we don't want you to sink a lot of money into something that isn't going to really solve the problem. It's always good to to really be honest with yourself about whether it would be better to save money and start with something new or significantly newer.
Yep. Cool. Do we want to move on? Or
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Good. Okay. Next question, also from Fran. High notes on piccolo! Exclamation point. Problems to look out for. Solutions to remedy. So our order for this is going to be, me, and then Adam, and then they both felt the same time. Kim, and then Rachel. Okay. So, high notes. Okay. Problems to look out for. Solutions to remedy. Make sure that your head joint cork is in the right spot. And if you are pretty confident that the piccolo is working pretty well there, I would always suggest, I know this isn't a very techie response, but lessons with a piccolo specialist can really, really help to get your face into the right spot for high notes on piccolo, because they really are different. Piccolo looks a lot like a mini flute, but it's a different technique, and I'll let somebody else go.
Yeah, lessons with a piccolo specific teacher are great. Like that changed my playing forever. But also, kind of going back to the question just before it, we also need to assess how old the instrument is, what condition it is, because as instruments get older, the acoustics do change and notes do become resistant or disappear altogether up there. And it's not that that can't be remedied or improved, but it needs to be assessed. But yeah, lessons with a piccolo teacher changed my life.
Kim.
One of the other things is to be aware, if you're not a professional player that's already taken a ton of specific lessons, is that the fingerings on piccolo are not the same as on flute, and that's not extended technique or anything. The fundamental fingerings that we use on piccolo are often dramatically different. The most common example that most players know is the high G sharp A flat. So if you don't have I had the book and then I put it away. There's a piccolo book that gives you fingerings. Sorry. Get the
Red
book.
card.
Damn it. Sorry.
I don't have much to say, and then we can get
I
that.
tried.
You're so detailed. This is wonderful. Yeah, there are certain high notes on piccolo that are just problematic because of the physical nature of it. But definitely, if it has not had a COA in a while, do yourself a favor and get it tuned up, because that if there are leaks, that'll totally hold you back. And secondly, piccolo head joint corks do not need to be replaced, and they actually don't even last as long as flute head joints do. And if that thing is leaking, it's going to wreak havoc on your third octave, and you'll be sad for no reason. So just get the head joint cork checked if you haven't in a while.
Yeah. Okay, free for all.
Kim.
Yeah.
This book.
Yeah, it's by Jan Gippo. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
definitely, even if you play a little bit of piccolo, it is not that expensive a book. Just get it, because it is way more than just fingerings. I mean, it's primarily fingerings, but it does also give a lot of really good information. So, I mean, definitely a teacher, all of that other kind of stuff, but this is a really good, solid foundational book that everybody who plays piccolo should have, I think, at least as a reference. There's tons of online stuff as well, but this is just a really, it gives a whole bunch of information about how piccolos and flutes are different and stuff like that, which is very informative, and it will transform the way that you look at a piccolo when you're playing them. So
cool. We still have a minute and a half if we want to.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of, well, I mean, just because I can talk about this forever and ever, but yeah, they really are not the same instruments. As Kim had said, the fundamental fingerings, like the first 2 octaves are the same. When you get up to the top, they really are not.
Yeah.
But kind of one way that you can tell if the instrument is starting to have some response issues that are related to the age is if you know it is older and you can get the notes out, but only at like fortissimo. That's usually like a player's indicator that perhaps something in the wood has changed. And sometimes if you can get it out, but just loudly, then sometimes we can do things to improve that, but for the most part, that needs to be in the hands of the maker or a specialist that's specifically extremely familiar with piccolo acoustics, because otherwise you're opening a whole can of worms there. It can be a disaster.
It's
yeah.
one of the reasons that they make the wave type style and the standard styles of head joints, especially for people who double, who it's not their primary instrument. So you may also find that one of those works better for like individual players based on anatomy, or not. So
cool. All right. Do we want to move on?
Yeah.
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 All right. Woohoo.
Sure, let's do it.
How about customizations for flutes for comfort too? Another player shared their custom cork riser pad on their left hand first finger key, so I put one on my flute. Is there anything else that can be done? So for this one, we've got Rachel, Adam, Kim, and then me.
Customizations. Well, I don't have as much fun show and tell stuff as you guys do. So some of the things I'm talking about, you guys can show. But one of my favorite products is Plugos. And it's not exactly an extension, but it's a really nice closed hole option. It's a metal plug that Powell makes, and it has a nice O-ring seal on it, and the feel of it literally just feels like a closed key. It's so comfortable, and it looks nice too. That's my favorite plug. Yeah.
Cool. Adam, do you want me to make it big?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, that is what it is. Okay, so I had a lot of hand problems when I was playing a lot, and I used the Brandon plastic C-sharp extension for quite a while, but it kept breaking on me. So then when I was a tech, I finally made this little key extension here out of brass. Someday I'll replace it with silver, but I'm one of those people that do as I say, not as I do, and it's been like 5 years since I've worked on my flute. But anyway, I have this little, I modeled it after the Brandon because I really liked that. And it's just soft soldered on.
Brandon one.
Oh, I love that one too.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's based on the
Very
Brandon.
comfortable.
Okay.
And then like, well, I'll show it.
Yeah.
In the free.
Okay. Kim.
Okay, since we're on sort of the extra.
Yeah, hang on.
Okay.
Okay.
So the other thing that we can do is we can either solder them on or put temporary ones on, but there are key extensions that you can get. Some of them are ones that we make ourselves. Some of them are aftermarket. So that's just, it can be put in any open hole key. This is an extension for the G sharp. So it also can get put on this. The G sharp extension has to be soldered on by a technician. So it's more expensive, but.
Cool. So speaking of that, you can also super glue it if you're in a location where you cannot get to.
We can't see you,
yes.
Sarah.
Oh, you can't hear me?
We can't see you.
See me.
They
Okay, hang on. Spotlight. Me.
Oh, yes.
Am I here?
There you go.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Yes. You
Okay,
back.
cool.
It's a good.
All right, cool. So yes, you can also you can use super glue, which then just comes off with acetone. But anyway, so I have my flute completely modified up the wazoo because I had some problems with tendonitis. Can I go into the free?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was having problems with tendonitis because, like most music performance majors, I worked at Starbucks.
Like a rite of passage.
Yeah. So anyway, so I had John Lunn. This is before I knew anything about anything. John Lunn built me this beautiful angled foot joint cluster for my pinkies because I have small hands. And you can see I also have a thumb port on because I have a very awkward and heavy C sharp trill on my flute, and it just makes my flute want to roll backwards all the time. And then I also have my left hand. John Lunn did this for me as well. He took off my open hole G key, replaced it with a closed hole, stuck an extension on, and then extended out my G sharp. So this is a more permanent solution if you are pretty darn sure like what you want to have done to your flute is done to your flute. And I don't have plans to sell this, so it's fine with me.
Even if you did, it's just like only better for it. That flute is so comfortable.
Oh, so speaking of not ever having time to fix my own flute, because I don't. So my solution to is that I just send my flute to Rachel, and she does my COA.
I know that flute's comfortable. Why do you think I kept it for so long?
That's exactly it. Go for it next time. Yeah, just
we're much better
I
at making time for clients than we are for ourselves. So
Yes.
if we turn each other into clients, we get our
Yes.
stuff
So
in.
after like a solid year of me rescheduling my flute like every 2 weeks to 2 weeks later, I finally was like, ugh, Rachel, please. And like kudos to Rachel, because working on another technician's instrument is like super scary, and she
So
did
scary.
an awesome job. So good.
Two
Yeah.
other small little things. One is, if you know clarinet players, they'll have little tooth guards for their mouthpieces. If you just need some grip, these work really, really well. They're just kind of like a self-stick, like black rubber, and they peel right off. They don't tarnish. They don't damage the metal in any way. And then the second thing is, most of us have the Jeannie Baxtresser orchestral excerpt books. I think it's the second one. It has a full like headshot of her, and I think it's a red dress. And you see her with her Haynes flute, and it has all of these extensions for her left hand. So that's just kind of a neat picture to look at.
So that was the end of our free-for-all time. Does anybody want to just like
I just
add anything?
wanted to show the left hand
Okay.
thumb port,
Let me make
because you had the right hand one. So
Yes.
this one is a little bit different. It goes on your left hand, and it just brings the wall of the flute out enough so that you're not crunched over, because some people are really, I've got very long fingers and I tend to crunch over. So it can help if you're having like carpal tunnel issues, or if you're having just general sort of pain that way. It slips on and off, so it's not permanent. It doesn't scratch or anything like that. And they're not expensive. They're the same price as the right hand ports, which come in 2 different styles. So there's a piccolo one as well. But the piccolo one, you have to check it on your piccolo, because it doesn't actually fit on all of the piccolos, just because of the way key placement is on picks, because it's not as standard as on flutes.
Awesome. All right. Anything anybody else wants to add? No,
I have a whole pile of these things here.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, and I think all of us have at some point or another come up with a creative solution for our clients. So whether it's using pre-existing stuff or making something, completely new, like we're all, I think, willing to help people.
Yeah. I had
out.
a client once that needed to switch to a swan style head joint, but they weren't terribly happy with it didn't have the same sound that they were looking for. So we actually ended up grafting her embouchure plate and riser onto the swan. And that helped her a lot. She was able to keep playing. So
cool.
Yeah, we're not afraid to get creative. So.
Yeah. All right. So, I think we're on to our last question, and this is actually pretty good timing. Would you be able to go through each of your play testing routines for flutes after you've repaired them? Also, what are you looking for when doing them? And for piccolo as well. Okay, so 30 seconds or less. Here we go. We've got Adam, Rachel, Kim, and I'm last again.
We're not actually doing demos, just
all right. Who's first? Adam, go for it. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm a really bad person to ask this question because I don't really talk about it much, but I have synesthesia, and I experience like movement and vertigo instead of seeing colors. So I can feel it when something's not exactly how it should be, and I can hear it and I can isolate immediately where it is just because of how I experience sound. But I do have like mechanical ways for me to sort of even out what I think of as warbles in the sounds. And I'll let you all talk about it because I was useless.
Useless. Rachel.
That's cool Adam trivia though. I have a lot of different things that I use to play test my flutes, but they're all the same lots of things. Like I'm really consistent, and I make sure each flute can do all of these things. My personal favorite though is excerpts. It's fun, and it's also really revealing because they're generally challenging for the instruments anyways. So it's a good test.
All right.
That's all I'll go into in a 30-second one.
All right. Nice. Kim.
Um, I use for playtesting for myself, I have like a fairly specific routine that I follow, but I also tend to pick and choose based on all sorts of excerpts and stuff like that that's going on. I have particular notes that I tend to get a little bit hyper focused on because I want them to just be flawless for people, or as flawless as the instrument's able to do. So for me, I tend to spend a lot of time getting A's, the high A's, like just super perfect, and the high F sharps and high F's. So yeah.
Cool. So I tend to focus on the bottom of the flute, because usually and this kind of speaks to, so we like most of us were performance majors, like we all play professionally, like flutes, all of our main instruments, like this is our jam, like, so we have the we have the technique to really know when a flute just isn't responding to that like tiniest degree. And so like for me, the big tell, can I go into the free for all?
Yes.
For me, the biggest indicator for me that I tend to focus on is can I get leaps to go down low, from high to low, and can I articulate hard and have that note pop out without cracking and without disappearing and just like be rock solid. I also tend to play a lot of excerpts and stuff, so like Midsummer Night's Dream is really good for that. Telemon, like the second movement of the B flat. One of the Fantasy, that's the one.
Yeah.
And I actually have an etude book of saxophone pieces that I use, because there's tons of low B's and low C's in there, and if I can do running 16th notes staccato down to low B and low C, like it's pretty much sorted itself out at that point. And I do check the high stuff too, but for me, in my own personal playing style, that's the tell for me that a flute is either there or not there.
Yeah, to kind of at least give some useful information about what I do, at least not useful, interesting. For me, if I'm always trying to make sure that I don't have something over adjusted, because of what you have to do as a player to compensate for that, and also just because a lot of times it does improve the way the whole flute as a unit resonates. But for me, I always try to, if I'm playing through pieces, I'm always trying to do it in a way that has as many strange fingering combinations as I can possibly come up with. So the two pieces that I keep out near my desk is the Griffiths poem, because that has all kinds of crazy fingering combinations.
That's on mine too.
Yeah,
and
too.
And then I also play a lot through the Jolivet Chantelinos. The 7/8 section is really low, it's really aggressive, and it has the wildest fingerings you've ever heard of, but I love that piece. That was my favorite piece to play in college. So those are the two that I still kind of play through when I'm testing something, because if it can make it through Jolivet, it's probably fine.
Yeah. Sections of the Prokofiev Sonata too.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, that's usually on the bench, or on the stand somewhere.
That was our last question. We did start, we started, I don't know, a little after 9:30, so we can keep riffing on this for a few more minutes if we want.
I was just gonna say, like, one of my favorite for like piccolo, because we're talking about flute, but one of my favorite piccolo books that I use almost all the time, just because it's got like a million tons of everything in it, is the Trevor Way one. And this isn't a promo shot. It's literally the thing that I always use, because often I'll get asked, like a client will say, hey, I'm playing pick and I've got this particular piece that I'm trying to play and I want to make sure it works. So there's a lot of excerpts in that book. So this year has been the year of Mother Goose. I'm not sure why, but Mother Goose has been really popular this year. So a lot of it happens to be in that book. So I can just like pick it up and go, I've already played through it. So the client knows, and we tend to be on the same page. My clients tend to tell me what they're playing, and I tend to run through some of their repertoire before handing their flutes back, so that I know that if there's any hiccups they've been having, that those hiccups are gone. It's
I
one
have
of
a
the
client,
really nice things of being able to be a player.
yeah,
And
I have a client who asks if I will install certain pieces on their flute.
Oh, that's excellent. Can I do that on my flute? Because I don't. I mean, I get to practice on everyone else's COAs. Let's be realistic here. I spend much more time playing everybody else's flute than I get to play on my poor little flute.
That's true.
so sad.
We have to be like chameleons a lot, you know, to be able to perform at the highest level on everything we pick up. And it's just, you learn to be flexible, which is
All
really
those
fun though.
different head
I kind of love playing all these different flutes. So.
Yeah, it's really actually it's helped me to love my own flute more in a way, because I know what's out there, and when I get flute envy, it's because I'm out of shape.
Yeah.
Going back to the piccolo thing, that book is great. And then also just because I play so much piccolo and I work on so many of them, for me, I specifically play through the bolero excerpt just because it's high and it's awkward fingerings and you're going to hear the warbles up there.
Yeah.
And then also I will play, I don't know how different people pronounce it, either like turando or turandot, because it's so soft and it's high. And if something's leaking at all way up there, it's not going to speak. It's going to crack on you. But you have to play a lot of piccolo, though, to kind of have that kind of control. So there are just lots of other options, too. But that's just what I do.
Yeah, I think it's important to note it, like, because we've had this conversation, not to this extent, but amongst ourselves, you know, as we're working. And it's really fascinating to me that, like, you know, the first time Kim, for example, mentioned that she really hones in on the high A's, I was like, why? Like, because that's not something that I've ever done. You know, I was like, why? They just come out. Like, what are you even talking about, right? But to her ear and her style of playing, she's solving certain problems by, you know, focusing on that note that I solve by doing my low stuff, right?
Yes,
so we're getting to the same end result, but because we're different players, right? Like the key configurations, like we're hearing the same problem, we're just hearing it from different approaches. Yeah,
it's so important. Also, Kim, I am high A obsessed as well.
You know what? Here's the thing: is that I didn't used to be until there was an article many years ago that said something to the effect of, you know, the day that you don't need to practice is the day that you can just pick up an instrument and play a pianissimo high A, and it just comes out and you don't have to work at it.
I don't
and
have to
it's
practice
been some
ever.
kind of weird kind of
take your flute to Kim and you don't have to practice.
No, but it's become this kind of like I never realized it was a huge challenge for some people, but apparently it is, and that's so I always make sure that they like sail out and stuff like that, because it's such a revealing note. A little piece of we were talking about our individual sort of how we are physically and stuff like that. I was in a car accident in 2004. So I actually have a spinal cord injury, so I play very lightly. So I do a lot of my play testing routines around the fact that I can't put any pressure on keys. So I have a very specific routine based on that kind of stuff as well. So a lot of us work around our strengths and our challenges and incorporate those so that we can get the best results for players.
Yeah, and so speaking of like the playing lightly thing, when you're working on flutes, it is so important to play as lightly as possible, because flute players do play lighter than other woodwind players. They just do. And so you really have to be sensitive to that. And it's funny though, because like, and back to when we were talking about, like, we work on so many different flutes. I have a flute here now that I'm having trouble playing it because the spring tension is so much heavier. Like, it's literally pushing my fingers off of the keys, but I don't want to change it because that's what the person is used to. So like, I keep going, and like, oh my gosh, my thumb isn't even closing the thumb hole. And then because I have small hands, a lot of times I will play test with plugs in, all 5 plugs in, because otherwise I get a false, like, I think that there's something wrong, but it's just me not covering up that particular flute's open hole configuration, because they are all different. And some of them are really wide and really big. And you guys, you know, you saw my tricked out comfy flute. Like, I've gotten really lazy over the years.
It's custom, not lazy.
Custom. It's healthy for my hands.
I also usually play with my right hand thumb off when I'm playtesting stuff. If I'm doing like De La Sonorite or something like that, and I'm doing like long tones, I actually will physically remove my thumb from the body of the flute.
My flute back
and
that too.
I figured that might be why you're doing it.
And I'll lay down a low B.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then also, like, one thing I do that I know is strange, when I'm patting an instrument, I start on the foot joint.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'll do is I'll pop the head joint onto the foot joint, and I'll disengage the springs, and it should play whatever that note is really loud.
Nice.
So we all have our little quirky things.
That is with that C adjustment in, though.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
I do that,
Yeah.
and then I'll do it, but I'll engage just the C sharp. You know, so that way I have a little bit of pressure trying to lift it.
Something kicking it up.
The visual of that.
Little quirks. What is it?
I'm sorry to talk over you. I just, like, the visual that I got when you talked about that reminded me of, have you seen that running horse gif where it's just the head attached to hind legs? That's what the flute on the foot joint reminds me of.
That, or like middle school band, I mean.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
I have not seen that, but I can imagine it. So
I'll send it to you, don't worry.
It's our
I'll
new
put it in the
mascot.
comments.
Anyway.
Hey friends, I think we made it to an hour. So
woohoo.
that's great. I am so happy that all of you people came and joined us. Oh, we got the clappy hands. Thank you, Stephanie.
Especially since we had so much technical difficulty.
Yeah, I can't believe we're just so honored that you all hung out for a half hour while we tried to make computers work and then couldn't, and then, you know, we're brave enough to jump on the Zoom with us. We do have our Patreon up and running now. So if you would like to join us on a Zoom, but actually get to talk to us, the Patreon will give you a way to do that. So we have levels. If you join at either $5 or $10 a month, we'll have a special show just for people, just for patrons. And you can come and ask us all of your questions live, and in a format just like this, and we won't mute you. So that's patreon.com/flute-tech-talk. And once again, we're so thrilled that people are watching and appreciating what we do, and it's just, yeah, it's great to see you all here. So thank you. That's it. I think I'm gonna hit end.
Yeah.
Thank you, wonderful people. We
Thank you,
appreciate
wonderful
so much.
everyone.
All right, have a great day, everybody.
Bye.